Hello and welcome to Coffee with Carey. Well, thank you so much for stopping by today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit, it's dating advice, I should probably tell you, not beauty, not fashion, not makeup. I just did a new makeup tutorial. This was the look, a new palette. Check that out if you haven't. In fact, why don't you subscribe? If you're new here and haven't yet subscribed, that would be awesome. You know what I do. And this is dating advice because I'm a matchmaker and a dating coach. And what I wanted to touch upon today, because it comes up more and more often, is dating when you don't drink. Ways to kind of work around that, some thoughts I have. If that's interesting, I hope you'll stick around because that's what we're talking about right now. So I'm not just talking off the top of my head. I do have experience with dating and not drinking, and I have quite a few clients who don't drink for numerous reasons, whether it's health reasons, whether it is that they don't tolerate alcohol. People have many reasons for not drinking. I don't drink myself. I was never much of a drinker and decided 4 or so years ago in solidarity to quit drinking with somebody else who's important in my life. But it was no big deal because I rarely drank anyway. It would always make me a horrible date, actually. It made me tired. And then eventually I came to think of alcohol as a toxin and I never enjoyed it. So for me, I don't drink. And when I have dated, I don't obviously drink on dates. And so I have some firsthand experience. I have a lot of clients who, for many different reasons, don't drink alcohol on a date. And they sometimes are self-conscious about that or worried what other people are going to think, the people I'm matching them with, if I choose to share the information about them not drinking, have questions on whether they're allowed to drink. So I thought we could just talk about this today. And I have a couple points I want to make. First one is that I wanted to let you know, in this day and age, it's not a big deal. People have lots of different dietary needs, different choices they're making with what they eat. I ask that question when I'm screening people. Is there any special diet you're adhering to these days? Some people say, nope, I eat everything. Others are telling me they're sort of Mediterranean. Other people say I'm strict keto with intermittent fasting. Other people tell me that they're vegetarian, vegan, all different types of diets that we have. And it's the same with alcohol. And I don't think we have to attach such importance to whether or not somebody is choosing to drink alcohol on a date. So one of the things that comes up often is, should I still fix them up and send them to a bar? And it really depends on the person. And if you don't drink or you're dating somebody who doesn't drink, communication is the key here. Because the thing is, when they're serving alcohol, what usually comes along with that is kind of a romantic ambiance, a vibe of nightlife and romance, if I choose the right place to send people or send myself. So I always like that vibe of a 7 o'clock cocktail date, and I don't think it really should matter whether I'm choosing to drink something that does or does not have alcohol in it. And I think there are ways you can explain this to someone else, and I want to get into that. But first, I want to discuss whether you should let somebody know ahead of time that you're not going to be drinking alcohol. I think it is very much your own personal decision as to whether you want to let someone know ahead of time that on this date you won't be drinking alcohol. And I don't think you have to feel obliged to do so. I can think of a couple reasons that you do and a couple that you don't. Let's just touch on those. You might want to tell somebody so that it's not in that moment uncomfortable for them wondering whether you're all right with them drinking. That would be the number one reason you would tell them ahead of time. The second reason you might want to tell someone ahead of time is that if that's a really important part of their lifestyle, engaging in beverages that contain alcohol, they may not want to date you. I did have a client who was a wine collector, and she's one of the few people who had a preference that she truly wanted to date somebody who enjoyed wine. So she would not do well with somebody who was sober or not drinking alcohol. Also these days, with the legalization of marijuana, some people don't drink alcohol because they are more 420 friendly and would prefer to do that to relax on a weekend. Are we having those conversations ahead of time? I am, but I'm trying to cover all the bases to make sure that my matches are as much on the same page as possible. You may want to think about whether that's a conversation you have prior to putting on your lipstick, getting in your car, and driving across town. But it's one of the things we talk about now. I do ask people if they drink socially. The other reason you might want to tell somebody ahead of time would be that If you're not drinking because you're in the program, for instance, they may have a preference to not date somebody who has had alcohol issues in the past. The other side of this is that, do you owe that to them before a date or on a first date? Not necessarily. That's your choice and your history. And sometimes there are people who choose to get to know somebody a little bit better before they want to share that information. And that's totally fair as well. These are the types of conversations, though, that you should be having on a first date. If somebody chooses not to have a drink, it is certainly a valid question to ask whether this is something recent for them or if they've chosen not to drink alcohol for a long time, especially if it's going to be a deal breaker for you. But in truth, I think the mannered thing to do is to just wait until that person wants to share that with you. So let's talk a little bit about whether you would want to date in a bar situation or a restaurant that serves alcohol and how that works for you, if you're comfortable or not. There are some people who don't drink alcohol because they can't be around alcohol. It would set them back into a pattern that they don't want to repeat. And for those people, I think there are plenty of other ways to have first dates, especially in nicer weather. It's a little harder here in Chicago to find fun and interesting things to do. I've got a list of things to do on a second date that I just put up an episode last week. And I think that's some great ideas for a date that you could certainly use as a first date if you didn't want to do the typical meet for cocktails and perhaps appetizers during the week. But you can always do brunch. You can always do coffee and a walk. Go somewhere where there's an activity that precludes the drinking part of a date. There's lots of other options. I will put a link to that ideas for a second date episode right here and right here. And then you can check those out and use them for a first date instead. And one of the things I really wanted to share with you, if you're choosing for whatever reason not to drink alcohol on a date and somebody asks you, oh, you don't drink, is that I never feel obligated to share my whole story of why I don't. I usually will just share something more amusing and say, trust me, you don't want me drinking. It makes me the most boring date ever. After 5 sips, I'll just be yawning incessantly. And you'll think it's you, but it's not. It's just the way that my body reacts to alcohol. And I don't need the headache tomorrow. I've got a big day I'm looking forward to. So you can say something as simple as that if you don't want to go into your whole rationale for not wanting to partake in a cocktail. And you can always order whatever. You can order, whatever you drink at home, you can order there. So I've been known to order coffee. If I've gotten there first, I ask if they have coffee. I've called to see if they have coffee because, I'm a coffee lover. Don't you know? I have 2 cups of coffee here. The other thing I did once, which I thought was kind of funny, is that I had a Monster. You know me and my caffeine. I had a can of Monster in my purse, and I brought it there. I had a glass of water. I just asked for half a glass of water, and at the comedy club is where we were. I drank my water, and then I quietly poured it into my glass. So you can bring your own beverages. I think they frown upon that, but I knew I had a taste for Monster and I knew they wouldn't have them there, so I brought my own. I think the point that I really want to get across here is that if you don't drink for whatever reason, but most especially if you're following a 12-step program and you are comfortable in the situation where people are serving and drinking alcohol, is that don't feel like you have to explain yourself, because you would be amazed how many people these days are not drinking and they have no qualms about not drinking and or explaining themselves. People are very health conscious these days, and in the same way that they're choosing what to limit in their diet, they're also choosing what to limit in their beverages. And when you think about it, I have this conversation a lot defending my choice not to drink alcohol. It's a freaking toxin. That's why it makes you woozy. Your brain is revolting against a toxin in your body. So I was never a fan of that. It just seemed so unhealthy to me, and I never liked that feeling, and I don't feel the need to explain myself on a first date, nor should you have to. Unless that makes you comfortable and more confident moving forward, and you would like to explain why you're choosing not to have a drink. And as I said, it should not prohibit you from having a fun date in a multitude of circumstances. There's so many fun things to do. Take your camera out on a walk, go to Starbucks and grab a iced tea and take your camera out and compete in who can take the best urban photos. Or go to the beach and play Frisbee. You can pick up Subway sandwiches and go to a park and watch kids play Little League baseball. There's a million things to do on a first date. You're just looking for a place where you can have a conversation. The most important thing about choosing a place for a date is that you can hear one another talk. That's really all. That's why movies aren't great. Comedy clubs aren't great if they're going to be the entire date and there's no extra time for conversation. But anywhere you can hear a person share things about themselves and you can do the same, that's a great first date spot, and you don't have to be drinking anything. So I hope you found this helpful and it made you more confident with whatever choice you're making, whatever you eat, whatever you drink, that you can go anywhere that makes you feel comfortable meeting someone new and are open to learning about another person. And don't forget, don't be so self-conscious. It's not about you. It's not all about you anyway. It's about your interest in them and letting them shine and hearing what they want to share with you. And if you do that for them and they do that for you, guess what? That was a great first date. If you found this helpful at all, please give it a thumbs up. While you're there, if you would subscribe and maybe hit that ring bell so that we can do this again sometime, that would be awesome. I look forward to seeing you again. So until then, have a good one.